Michael, how long have you been over in the States, and how did you leave from Ireland and come right over here, or did you go?
It's been back and forth. I'm actually very much my grandfather was a world teacher. His name is Tara Singh, and he had an ashram.
Oh, sure, right, sure.
Yeah, teaching the Course in Miracles.
Yep.
He is actually my grandfather, so we came over pretty much under the auspices of his order, his metaphysical mystery school.
Yeah, sure.
And more than close to him, I was actually close to his mentor, one of the pioneers in the mystery school tradition of America, a man called the Reverend Paul Solomon. And he was a great clairvoyant. He was called the second Edgar Casey, and he sadly has passed away. But his organization was called the Fellowship of Inner Light. And along with my grandfather's movement and people like Keith Critchlow and Sir George Trevelyan and what have you. And I was part of that community from a very, very young age, because my mother was a world-famous clairvoyant from India. And was world famous, so we came back and forth a lot through that, But the only trouble with that, of course, is that when you're around such illustrious, people,
right?
The Jerry Jampolskys and the different academes, Edgar G. Mitchell of the Noetic Institute. Unfortunately, when you kind of grow up around these people, the emphasis is on trying to find your own voice and not just be an echo box of somebody else. So the pressure's kind of on you to say, okay, you're not just going to sit under these mushrooms and meditate all day in these ashrams.
Right.
You've got to go out and find your own, your own voice.
Well, that's
exactly what happened.
Yeah. Just as an aside, what do you think of the Course in Miracles?
I tell you, Alex, really honestly, I love it. It's been part of my life. It's hard to put into words because it's been so much part of my life.
Yep.
It's one of those things that's been the center of my life. Personally speaking, I'm not too keen on the fact that they are using the God idea overly. So this is purely personal now, right? And it's not really a critique, because the beauty of the book is so intense that this is a very minor critique. But as we approach the end of the Piscean age, and I'm saying that because I know that you guys understand what I mean here.
Oh, yeah.
As we move out of the Piscean age and into the Aquarian age, we've got to really drop this whole displaced idea of spirituality, being outside of the self. So even though I understand why they wrote the book that way, and I don't really have a problem with it, because they do obviously define God as the higher force. It's not just the boring old Judeo-Christian, fabricated lie.
Right.
The Course in Miracles makes it clear that that's not what they're talking about. But even so, the very idea that you're still talking about some presence external to the self, the higher self, to me is a little bit, off-putting. But other than that, it's fantastic, and it's something that definitely should be in the lives of most people. It ties in very beautifully to the work of, Byron Katie. People are getting introduced to her work. Well, her work comes very much out of the Course in Miracles tradition,
Let me ask you a question, and only because I am so familiar with the initial, initial start of the Course in Miracles, which is
with Helen Schickman.
Interesting story in itself. But have you, and it's probably an unfair question, but have you, Michael, read the Course in Miracles by yourself, without instructions, without classes, without other people telling you what it means? Have you read it all by yourself?
You're a great man. I love you. Absolutely. And I know what you're getting at, and I totally support it, because this thing became cult. It became vogue.
Yeah.
It became a whole other little, bandwagon thing. And I agree with you totally, as Krishnamurti had already been saying when he was alive, that the very fact that it has become a collective thing, and we're all running down the street to the local, guru who's going to explain it all, is already part of the problem.
Yep.
So, absolutely, I couldn't see the meaning of it, actually, when I was a very young person and it first came into my life. I couldn't see what it was saying at all. And the reason is because everybody else was doing readings from morning to night. I grew up in a community that basically read it from morning to night, constantly pontificating and commenting on it. And I just wanted to get rid of all of those voices so I could say, what is this thing for itself,
Good.
And finally, I have done that. Yes, I have. In fact, I have the thing right here in front of me. It's amazing you should bring that up, because I have the new compendium version, which is all of the 3-in-1.
Yes, right.
And, I'm never far away from that, because it's so spiritually helpful.
Yeah. Let me tell you a story some of my listeners have heard. I haven't told it in a long time, but it shows you what ego can do to you. Many years ago, and from what you're saying, you were just a little boy. I, back in the mid-'60s, myself and two other people started a program called Silva Mind Control. And from that, after several years, I just couldn't handle working with them, so I went off on my own, and I had a course called Mind Development. Used to teach all over the world. Had 27 different instructors that worked with me. And I used to have an institute in New York City. Well, I moved away from New York, and one thing led to another, traveled all around the United States, Canada, blah, blah, and went back and visited New York. One of my dearest friends had passed on. He was an older gentleman, but he was just one of my dearest friends. I was in my 20s. He was in his 70s. And I went and stayed with his wife for, I guess, several weeks or maybe a couple of months. And one night, her name is Polly, that's all I'll say. Polly came home with a whole bunch of papers. And she said, I'd like you to read something and tell me what you think of it. So she had and all I remember is the size of the papers, Michael, were like 11 by 14, not 8.5 by 11, but bigger, with large print and what have you. So I started reading, and I said, well, Polly, that's what I teach.
Right.
It was the original manuscript for A Course in Miracles. And
it was already familiar to you?
No, only the concepts, because that's what I had been teaching for 10 or 15 years.
Right, the concepts, that's what it was, yes.
And I thought I was such a smart ass that I flippantly said, oh, well, this is what I teach too, and never followed up on it. Now, that's an example where God was guiding the course away from somebody as dumb as me.
It happens. You see, that's part of the course. You know, the course is not just reading the text of the book. The course is our relationship with the book, our coming to it, our moving away from it, our picking it up, and our putting it down. They make this very clear that the whole thing is part of the course. You know, not just your reading of the text and meditating on the text. It's also your contradiction of the text. You know, this is none of these things that are theological tomes. Any book that is put before us as a holy book, you have to be already very skeptical, and you must do your best to contradict everything that it says in it, because that's what the book is actually telling you. If the book is half decent as a spiritual manifesto, it will be asking you to do that. It will be asking you to doubt and to use your critical reason, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
As well as your faith and your belief.
Well, I can say this, that it had, once I did read it, and when I read it, then I realized what it was that I was reading, because nobody told me, oh, this is something that you saw many years ago. But that book has had a profound effect on my life.
I think that people should. I've recommended people to have it, even though I know they're not readers. And I say, look, this is a book that when you're just sitting of an evening, and you just open it randomly, pick a number, or just pick a number, because the lessons are all numbered. So I just tell people, get up in the morning, just open it randomly, there's your message for the day. Or when you come up with a number in your head, just open it at the relative page. Use it purely as a reference book, and already it's going to come alive. There's certain books that you can do that with, and The Course in Miracles is one of them. So somebody doesn't just have to sit down and start reading it from A to Z in this formative way, you know. These things are eclectic, and they require a relationship. It very much strikes at this philosophy that I have about the inanimate objects can also be fallen in love with. In the Western world, we are so able to only create emotional connections with other human beings because, of course, what happens? They give us back the cues and the affectations that we want. So, of course, it's easy to love somebody who does that. But wait a minute, aren't ruined buildings and trees and stones and rocks and rivers and guitars and pianos and instruments also worth falling in love with? There are certain books, but we don't really have those in our mind as things we say we love them, but we can actually fall in love with them as well in the same way, you know, that we do with human beings. And when you do that, you're a lot less lonely for a start. You're a lot less deceived for a second thing, and you know, you're also more privy to the intelligence of the universe, because the intelligence of the universe expresses itself through these so-called inanimate objects, whereas it expresses itself only in a very confused and distorted and egoistic way through human beings. So it's another thing we need. It's an old Druidic thing of, you know, that we need to get back to, is the idea of the power of inanimate things that come alive when we love them and fall in love with them.
Well, because we are feeding them our vibrational energy, and these supposedly inanimate objects are absorbing exactly who we are, and that's where psychometry is true. I mean, one of the things that I do in my classes is, and I don't teach all the time anymore, but periodically I do, Michael, and one of the things that we do is we do psychometry so that people can begin to see, number one, that inanimate objects maintain a vibrational rate of the individual that has had them, and number two, that we, all of us, have an ability of tuning into that and then finding out whatever you want to know about that individual that owns it or has held it.
That's right, and it's one of the most ancient of all sciences. It opens the door to many other clairvoyant abilities. It
Yep.
totally opens you up to using the pendulum and going further.
Sure.
Yes, it's very essential.
Very interesting.
And it's a great subject.